Now, the Protection of Personal Information Bill has been signed into law, and joining us now to explain what businesses and people can expect the implications to be is Dean Shivers, Director at Deloitte. Dean, as we unpack this, many people refer to it as POPI. Tell us why it's so important, especially since the law has been signed by President Jacob Zuma.
So I think it's important because it's a piece of legislation that's been knocking around for a while now, since 2009. An important piece of legislation because we probably in excess of 100 countries have data privacy laws already. So we're really joining a global world of data privacy. It's important from a personal perspective, it's important from a constitutional perspective, and it's important from an international trade perspective. So an important piece of legislation for us to finally have signed.
Good news for South African consumers, but for businesses, which of them might be impacted negatively?
So really, look, this is a data piece of legislation. It's not IT, it's data. So it impacts everybody who processes data about people and companies. So it really impacts everybody. If you're looking at who it impacts mostly, probably looking at people who process the most data, financial services sector, healthcare, telecoms, probably them more than mining and manufacturing. But it's data, so it's everybody.
And it's privacy.
It's data privacy. So it's really the way in which companies are allowed to process information about people and about companies, what they can and can't do.
All right, processing. You're still talking accountant speak. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Before the NCA, National Credit Act, was brought into being in South Africa, the banks went nuts in trying to sell credit to people. I've found my cell phone has been ringing a lot lately with people who have access to my information, who should never have access to that information, trying to sell me hotel rooms or whatever the case might be. Is that going to stop?
So it should substantially reduce. The reason being that this sets out the rule set for how data can be handled, and one of the elements that's particularly regulated is direct marketing. So the way that people can and can't process your data is regulated, and direct marketing is specifically regulated. Companies cannot direct market to people without the buy-in. You have to opt in to direct marketing.
But many of these companies who phone us and try to sell us these strange things, I've had no relationship with them whatsoever, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Where do they get my information from, and in future, is that going to be blocked to them?
Well, look, historically, we've had no data privacy law. So data is very freely traded, passed around, used as companies like. So that will change going forward. So going forward, if you are contacted via direct marketing, the ability for you to go to the regulator and say, call on that company to show where I've consented will be something you can do.
And if they're found to have not got my consent?
So the penalties for contravention are prison terms of up to 10 years, fines up to 10 million rand.
Prison, who would go to prison? The call center agent themselves, or how do you identify who to take to prison?
Hard to know at this point. It'll be something the regulator will have to make call on. I guess it'll be around the person who is responsible for that activity, remembering that every company will be appointing a new privacy officer. So that will be the person who will be responsible for compliance. So possibly that person, but really it will be for the regulator to decide that.
Have they been selling my information?
Globally, information is traded, and it's quite valuable. I think one of the reasons South Africa has such a high cybercrime rate, we're amongst the top in the world, is because our data is so badly protected.
So economic losses, no doubt, will be experienced there by some companies.
Well, I think that this should help that situation. I mean, South Africa is already a huge target for cybercrime because of the fact that our data is so freely available. So once these rules are in place and companies are treating data with much more respect, it should be much harder to attack South Africans.
So for South African consumers like Alec and I who get harassed, what rights does he have now that he should be aware of to take against these companies who contact him directly?
So it'll all be about the regulator. There will be a regulator established, and now that the President has signed it into law, that process of establishing the regulator can start, and all complaints are ones that can be lodged with that regulator. There is also one unique part to this Act, and that is that companies who breach the Act will now have an obligation to report themselves. So there's every ability for this regulator to be really powerful.
Come on, Dean. I mean, these guys who phone us to try and sell us boxes at the rugby are going to report themselves?
What is going to make it easier for this regulator, and hopefully they take advantage of that, is the fact that for anybody to sell you anything, they're going to have to disclose to you who they are. For you to take that name to the regulator, it's very easy for the regulator to prove that they haven't got your consent. It's simply a question of saying, give us the person's consent. If they can't produce it, they're guilty.
You mentioned the regulator quite a lot here. How will that be appointed, and who will take part in it, and how will they come about?
So the regulator has not yet been established because we've only had the bill. So now that the President has signed it, the process will begin. We don't know who that regulator will be. So that's really at the beginning stages. There is a 1-year compliance period for companies to get compliant. So really 2014 is the year that companies need to use to get compliant, and we will see the regulator being established.
Can we find out who these companies are who've been selling our information? Because I'd like to boycott them, wouldn't you?
So I guess the difficulty with that is that previously that wasn't illegal. So ultimately whether people were or were not passing data around was something that I guess we won't know, but that will change going forward, and that's one of the important parts of this legislation.
Well, let's celebrate it. I mean,
Agreed.
this is, hey Cooks,
Yes.
no more of these harassing phone calls when you're on deadline from somebody who wants to know whether you use the right face cream. Or whatever. Thanks, Dean Shivers, Director at Deloitte. And remember, you can email us at powerlunch@abn360.com.